So today we are going to study the chapter The Further Vision from your SR textbook Wheels. Now this chapter is actually taken from the famous book Time Machine, and in this book the further vision is the chapter number 14, in which the time machine. This is very famous book and it is written by H.G. Wells. Also his full name is Herald George Wells. About the author, Herald George Wells was born in 1886. He was a famous British science writer who, along with Jules Verne, defined the genre during the late 19th and 20th century and spawned many tropes including the time machine and alien invasion. So in something 90s, 19 in the year 1920s, 30s, he has written this sci-fi story related to fiction, what we call this as the fiction, because we don't know this. This is just imagination. And in his writings, he has written about the time machine and how the time machine can take you in future or in past. And he has also written a book on alien invasion. You can imagine the time when the space instruments were not developed that much, technology was not developed, but the writer's imagination can go beyond everything. This is what is shown by H.G. Wells in his writing The Time Machine and Alien Invasion. Now, whatever we are going to learn in this is nothing but about one of the chapters from his book, The Time Machine. Now, these are his famous books which he has written, and he had gained a lot of popularity. If you will see his books, they are all related to fiction, like Invisible Man, Moon, The War of the Worlds, then Things to Come. So this all were related to the future. Now we will start with the chapter. I have already told you of the sickness and confusion that comes with time traveling. And this time I was not seated properly in the saddle. For an indefinite time, I clung to the machine as it swayed and vibrated, quite unheeding how I went, and when I brought myself to look at the dials again, I was amazed to find where I had arrived. Now, actually, here I is the person who has traveled in the time traveling machine. Now, this person is said as the time traveler. Here, I is not the author. Now, in his book, The Time Machine, H.G. Wells has told about Mr. Hillary. Now, Mr. Hillary is a person who has gone for dinner to the time traveler, and the time traveler is telling him this story. So here I is not the author, but here I is the time traveler. Now this time traveler is telling to Mr. Hillary that already in the previous chapter, whatever I have told, that this is chapter number 14, and in the previous chapters the time traveler has told that how we feel the sickness and confusion once when we sit in the time traveling machine. You can see here in that those time they have designed such kind of time traveling machine, and it gives sickness. Now sickness of what? Many a times we also find that when we sit in a bus and we feel that nausea of some smell, and sometimes we feel that it's like omitting thing, like a feeling of omitting, or sometimes we feel that I'm unable to sit here. In the stomach, our stomach goes upset. So these all things happen when we are traveling. So the time traveler is saying that the same thing, that confusion, sickness is there, we are feeling some nausea. So that all is there when we are traveling in the time traveling machine. And this time I was not seated properly. Now saddle means what? That is nothing but the seat. You can see here the picture of a seat or a chair is shown, that is termed as saddle. So he was not sitting properly on that saddle, and suddenly the machine starts and he had to clung. Clung means hold tightly. He had held tightly to the seat and it swayed and it vibrated a lot. And where he went, he was unknown about it. One dial records days and another thousands of days, another millions of days, and another thousands of millions. Now you can see here in the picture the person is pulling the lever, he is holding the lever, and there are different dials. Dials means how the watch is having the dial. So like that dials are there, and in one dial you can find one dial was keeping the record of one day, another it turned into thousand, another millions of days. So like that, if we are having, when we are writing a number, how the place is unit, tens, thousands, hundred. So in that way there were different dials which was keeping the record of many, of a one day, then thousand day, second was millions of days. So it was calculating fast and the dials were rotating. Now, instead of reversing the levers, I had pulled them over so as to go forward with them. And when I came to look at these indicators, I found that the thousands hand was sweeping round as fast as the seconds hand of the watch into the future. Now, actually, the time traveler wanted to go in the past. But as you know, he was sitting, he was feeling that sickness, there was some confusion, and in that he had pulled them over, the levers he had pulled them, and instead of going back in the past, he was taken into the future. As I drove on, a peculiar change crept over the appearance of things. The palpitating grayness grew darker. Then, though I was still traveling with prodigious velocity, the blinking succession of day and night, which was usually indicative of a slower pace, returned. At last, a steady twilight brooded over the earth, a twilight only broken now and then when a comet glared across the darkling sky. The band of light that had indicated the sun had long since disappeared, for the sun had ceased to and the moon had vanished. So now here, as the machine was taking the time traveler into future, there were some certain changes going on all around. Now, the meaning of palpitating. Palpitating means generally we use this when our heart start beating faster. So that time we say our hearts palpitate, means growing faster, or the beats are growing faster. In the same way, the darkness was growing faster in the sky. And he was traveling with a very high speed. Velocity means nothing but speed. So he first it was going rapidly, the changes was there in the sky, in the whole surrounding, and at last a steady twilight. Twilight means the time when the before the sunset, sorry, after the sunset or before the sunrise. So we are saying early morning or evening time when there is no sun, but still there is light, some orangish light, pinkish light in the sky. So that time is said as twilight, when actual sun is not present, but the light is there. So that time is called twilight. So he can see everywhere on the earth there was the twilight. Now remember, the time machine is taking the person in past or in the future of the time. So he will not go in the space. There might be some confusion that we might be relating it to some astronomer going in the space. No, the person is taken into the traveling of the time, but that will be on the earth itself. So now on the earth that time, what he find that it was a twilight. The sun was not seen, as if the sun has disappeared, and the moon was also not there. Moon had also vanished. So it was that time when he had reached. Sometime before I stopped, the sun, red and very large, halted motionless upon the horizon, now and then suffering a momentary extinction. I perceived by this slowing down of its rising and setting that the work of the tidal drag was done. The earth had come to rest with one face to the sun, even as in our own time the moon faces the earth. Slower and slower went the circling hands until the thousandth one seemed motionless and the daily one was no longer a mere mist upon its scale. Still slower until the dim outline of desolate beach grew visible. So now as he landed completely, so he halted motionless. So his time machine came. It was as the whole surrounding was changing, it slowly came to rest, and that time he saw that there was the changes. The sun was just about setting and it was big. There was a moon which faces the earth, and slower and slower went the circling hands until the thousands seems motionless. That means he want to say that his dials, they were coming to rest and he was already reached in the future, and he was at the desolate beach. Desolate means deserted, uninhabited. So the time he has gone in the future now, and the beach was completely deserted. Excuse me. I stopped very gently and sat upon the time machine looking round. The sky was no longer blue. Northeastward it was inky black, and out of the blackness the pale white stars shone brightly and steadily. Overhead it was deep Indian red and starless, and southeastern eastward it grew brighter to a glowing scarlet, where cut by the horizon lay the huge hull of sun, red and motionless. Now what was the change he found in the surrounding? That the sky was not blue, the sky was inky black. So whole blackness was there in the sky. There were white stars. They were shining brightly, but they were very steady. Then there was the sea. The sea was red and motionless. There was not so much motion, or the waves were not moving faster. The sea was motionless, and there was little stress of life. So life, when we come to know, when there is green color seen on the earth, green color shows that there is life on the earth. The rocks were of harsh reddish color, and all trace of life that I could see at first was intensely green vegetation that was covered everywhere. So there were no trees, no plants, but somewhere green color vegetation was there. It was the same rich green that one sees on the forest moss or on the lichen in caves. So lichen, you can see here, I have shown this picture of fungus or the algae grown on, or the moss grown on the rocks or in the on the forest trees. So that only was visible everywhere. Plants which like this grow on the perpetual twilight. So perpetual means what? Never ending or never changing. So that twilight was same. It was not going darker. It was not becoming brighter. So same twilight was there, and the plants which could seen there was only this moss type of lichen and nothing else. There were no trees, no plants. Everywhere it looked like deserted or the barren land. Only somewhere we can find this green patches of the lichen. And the sea was red color, where which was motionless. There was no motion or no movement. The machine was standing on a sloping beach. There were no breakers and no waves. Only a slight oily swell rose and fell like a gentle breathing and showed that the eternal sea was still moving and living. I noticed that I was breathing very fast. The sensation reminded me of my only experience of mountaineering, and from that I judged the air to be more rare. Now here the time traveler is telling that the machine has stopped on the sloping beach. So I was on the beach and there were no breakers, no waves. There was slightly movement of the ocean or the sea, which shows that the sea water is alive, that is living. And he also came to know that he was not able to breathe properly. It was very difficult for him to breathe. And generally, this sensation of breathing is experienced when one is climbing the mountain. When we reach at the highest peak of the mountain, then we find the air is becoming thinner and thinner, and the mountaineers find it very difficult to breathe because of the thin air, less oxygen. And that's why the mountaineers are carrying the oxygen cylinder with them. So the same condition was of the time traveler. He found it very difficult to breathe, and he came to know that this is the same sensation when we climb the mountain highest peak, and this is due to the thin air. So the air becomes rare, so the oxygen level becomes rare, and that is why we have such feeling. And he came to know this time when I am on the earth in the future, the air is going to become very thin. Far away up the desolate slope, I saw a huge white butterfly-like thing fluttering up into the sky and disappear over low hillocks beyond. So there were hills on that place, and he saw a very huge white color butterfly that was flying in the sky, and it went beyond the hills. The sound of its voice was so dismal that I shivered and seated my place more firmly upon the machine. So now the sound of the wings and the butterfly flying was so dismal, means very in what we can say, it is very gloomy, very sad, or something suddenly it is very silent. And some if you have heard the sound of the wings of a huge eagle, or sometimes we can hear that sound in the animated movies, the dinosaurs wings sound, how it comes, the same sound he can hear that. And he was little bit afraid, he was shivering because of the fright of that sound, and he seated more firmly on his machine, looking around me again. And he was looking here and there, is someone coming from somewhere, is there something creature coming along? I saw that quite near, what I had taken to be the reddish mass of rock was moving slowly towards me. Now he was first only afraid because of the sound of that huge butterfly's wings, and then again he saw that whatever he has taken, that there is a reddish rock there, and that mass of rock was moving towards him. It was really a monstrous crab like creature. It had many legs moving slowly and uncertainly, its big claws saving its long antennae like Carter's wipes, waving and feeling, and its stalked eyes gleaming at you on either side of its metallic front. Its back was corrugated and blotched. Now, what he has taken, considering that it is a red rock, but that red rock was nothing but a crab-like creature. Now, this was also a huge creature. So the crab, and it was moving slowly towards him. Now he is considering antennae means knowing, no? So there is a small two um, filaments like things or to the crab that are called as the antennae. Now this antennae he is comparing to the carter's wife. Carter's wife means what? Carter means a person who is driving the horse cart, or a you can bullock cart is there, and they are having one leather like stick or some bamboo stick is there in their hand, very flexible like of stick, that is called as carter's wife. So his antennae, that crab's antennae, he is comparing to the carter's wife, and they were waving in the air, and his eyes were also gleaming. Now corrugated means, now its back was corrugated and blotched, means there were lines, parallel ridges. So when we can say, if we will see the skeleton of something, or some framework is there on which we have to put some one sheet of metal. So how the framework will be prepared, parallel bars will be there, and on that the mat will be, or the roof will be placed. So that is nothing but corrugated. Corrugated means a parallel ridges, series of parallel ridges to give strength or rigidity. So like that, its back, the crab's back was same like that, and it was blotch. Blotch means regular patches. Some colorful patches were there on its back. As I stared at this sinister apparition crawling towards me, felt a tickling on my cheek as though a fly had lighted there. Now, when he was so much surprised and he was looking at steadily, he was staring that creature crawling towards him, and the traveler was first only so much scared. Again, he saw this creature coming towards it. So he was continuously staring that creature, and suddenly what happened? He finds something tickle on his cheeks. So how we are having something, someone, he is taking the string of a grass or something and they are tickling towards our cheek. So some tickle he found on his cheek and he brushed it off. So he was still looking at the crab and he was just brushing his hand, his cheeks with his hand to move whatever thing it was tickling him. But in a moment it turned, and almost immediately came another by my ear. And as he removed that thing from his cheek, the another came to its ear. Now it was drawn swiftly out of my hand, and suddenly what is now one side to the cheek there was some tickle, so he had unknowingly he had just brushed that off. Another it came some tickling, again the sensation towards its ear, another his ear, and now what he did, he has drawn it swiftly with his hand. And to his surprise, I turned and I saw that I had grasped the antennae of another monster crab that stood just behind me. Now he was completely watching towards the crab coming in front of him, and he find a sensation that there is something at his cheek, so unknowingly he just brushed it off. Then there was another sensation of the tickling sensation to his ear, and he just grabbed hold of it and he turned back. As he turned back, to his surprise, he was holding this antennae, you can see in the picture of the another crab, and behind him there was another monster crab standing there, and it was about to eat him up. Its evil eyes were wriggling on their stalks, its mouth was all alive with appetite, and its vast claws, smeared with an algae slime, were descending upon me. So slime, you people are knowing what is slime. So that algae slime, it was falling from his mouth, and it was about to eat the time traveler, because it had almost came behind him, and the time traveler unknowingly had caught hold of the antennae, and now you can imagine what was going to happen further. So here I have shown you the algae slime, and it was falling on the time traveler's body, and the mouth was all open to feel the stomach of that crab. In a moment, my hand was on the lever, and I had placed a month between myself and these monsters, but I was still on the same beach, and I saw them distinctly now as soon as I stopped. Now, immediately, because he was already seated on the seat or the saddle of the time machine, so as soon as this monster crab had opened his mouth to open and eat the time traveler has pulled the lever 1 month ahead. And the time traveler, because of his machine, he was seated and he was holding by one hand that lever, he could go 1 month ahead. Now, as he reached 1 month ahead, his machine stopped, and dozens of them seemed to be crawling here and there in the soft light among a foliated sheets of intense green. Now here what he is saying that, excuse me. So suddenly he was, due to his machine, he was able to escape from that monster crab, and he reached 1 month ahead in the future again. So that time he saw there were so many such crabs crawling here and there on the beach, and the green sheet has become more intense. So that lichen has grown everywhere. The crabs have also grown in number. I cannot convey the sense of abominable desolation that hung over the world. The red eastern sky, the northward blackness, the salt Dead Sea, the stony beach, crawling with these foul, slow-steering monsters, the uniform poisonous-looking green of the lichenous plants, the thin air that hurts one's lungs, all contributed to an appalling effect. Now, this all scene, whatever the traveler has been experiencing, that he came to know this will be somewhere a very dangerous situation in our future. Now why? Because the sea has already died. The beach was only the stones were remain on the beach. There were crawling monsters. The crab has turned into monsters, and poisonous lichenous plants, instead of plants, this lichenous moss is growing everywhere. The air has become thin. So this is all in future, this will all will be the situation, and there will be no human stress there. Nowhere he was able to see any man or any living proper living creature, but whatever small creatures were there, that has turned into monster. Butterfly, we can see the butterfly is very small now, but in future, according to the time traveler, these small creatures will be turning into monsters. The life of human will be completely disappearing. There will be no human life, because the air is becoming thin, oxygen level will be becoming down. Even the sea is motionless. This shows that water is also depleting, and it is becoming more poisonous. I moved on 100 years, and there was the same red sun, a little larger, a little duller, the same dying sea, the same chill air, and the same crowd of earthy crustacea creeping in and out among the green weed and the red rocks. Then, after moving 1 month ahead, again the time traveler traveled 100 years further. So again 100 years he tried to go in future, but the same thing he find, and it had find that the same thing had become more larger. The sky has become more duller, blackish in color. There was the same dying sea, same cold air was there, but now there were more crustacea. Now this crustacea is nothing but, it is a word from zoology, that is crustacea, and it is related to the animals, family of animals, arthropods. Arthropods are nothing but like lobsters, crabs. So they come under this crustacea. Now they were creeping, so many such type of animals were seen creeping here and there, and this green color algae was there, red rocks were there. So this shows that in future the life is going to end. And I saw curved pale line like a vast new moon, and he could see some line, curved line, pale line of a new moon. The darkness grew apace, a cold wind flew from east, and the showering white flakes in the air increased in number. From the edge of the sea came a ripple and whisper. Beyond these lifeless sounds, the world was silent. So now, on that place where he was so many thousands of years ahead in the future, he found that there was so much darkness, cold wind was blowing, white flakes were there in the air, and everything, the sea came a ripple and whisper. There was sound, little bit sound, but everything was lifeless. Now all the sounds of man, the bleating of sea, the cries of birds, the hum of insect, the stir that makes the background of our lives, all that was over. So right now, whatever we are been experiencing on this today, like many sounds of man we can hear, bleating of sheep, crying of birds, hums of insects. So this all whichever is there in the background, that was all over in the future. As the darkness thickened and the cold of the air more intense, at last the white peaks of the distant hills vanished into blackness. Now, when he was there, still waiting, he could see that whatever hills were visible, that also now started turning into black. The breeze rose to a morning wind. In another moment, the pale stars alone were visible. The sky was absolutely black. So now it was turning slowly into night time. Now the sky has completely turned into black. The stars were visible, but the stars were pale looking. They were not as bright and twinkling, but they were very pale. A horror of this great darkness came on me. I felt pain in breathing. I shivered and a deadly nausea seized me. I got off the machine to recover myself. I felt giddy and incapable of facing the return journey. So now the time traveler was returning back. It was completely darkness. First he was having lot of trouble in breathing. He was shivering due to the cold, and he was feeling so much nauseatic, and he could not sit on the machine also properly. So he anyhow tried, and with very difficulty he could sit on his machine's seat on the saddle, and he somehow took all his energy to pull the lever back to come to its time now in the present time. and he was very sick and confused again. I saw again the moving thing upon the shoal. There was no mistake now that it was a moving time. Now this time he did not made any mistake. Now he started moving against the red water of the sea. Then I felt I was fainting. Now he has lost all his energy, and it was because he was not having getting proper air to breathe. So he clambered upon the saddle, means hold tightly. He sat awkward in awkward. Clambered means climb and sit in a very awkward condition because he was not having that much energy. But anyhow, he was able to come back again to his present time. So this is all about how he reached to a place in future where there was no life, while the insects, smaller insects, had turned into the monsters and everything was different. So this is the story of the chapter, The Further